Good afternoon and welcome to the Caregiver Teleconnection. My name is Glenda Rogers and I'm going to be your host for this afternoon session. Let me tell you a little bit about Dr. Jamie Husyman. Dr. Husyman built his innovative healthcare career on the premise that necessity is the mother of invention. His belief that the resilience of the human spirit and collaboration are key to our country's health future is the core of his philosophy. He is a fierce advocate of patient-centered healthcare and a workforce in touch with their own wellness. He has almost 30 years of medical and behavioral health experience in nonprofit and for-profit corporate leadership roles. Today, he works in provider relations and governmental affairs for WellMed Medical Management, a San Antonio, Texas-based physician-owned primary clinic organization. And if you're just tuning in, you may see that our title today is a little bit different than what came out in the calendar. Jamie will address that other topic at a later time, but today he's going to be talking about educate, energize, and empower our emotional intelligence as caregivers. So Jamie, please go ahead.
Thank you, Glenda. Can you hear me now?
Yes, so we can
Sounds
hear
like a Verizon commercial, y'all. I appreciate it. It is. Can you hear me now? Listen, I'm very grateful actually we shifted the titles because this one is more important obviously than the last one, given what we just went through. I've been upstairs. I did the keynote for the American Physician Group Conference on our emotional support response team. And I realized that the basis of everything in life is emotional intelligence. My Lord, we could be the smartest humans in the whole wide world, caregivers. But at the end of the day, if we're not educating, energizing, and empower our emotional intelligence, caregiving is going to be a much, much rougher road for us to hoe. Anyway, y'all are asking yourself, what is EQ? You know what IQ is, right? Well, EQ is a whole nother ballgame. EQ is literally, I think, what makes this world go round. EQ is what's going to get us out of COVID and be able to connect with other individuals. EQ is about becoming emotionally intelligent. Now, it's an internal function, okay? And I'm going to ask you all in your mind to go to whatever drives you to turn on today, whatever drives you to stay on in spite of those technical difficulties, why you are here listening. What is your why? That's what my important kind of quick 10-second exercise is going to be out. What is your why that you are actually here listening to me and to the WellMed Charitable Foundation? So if you will, close your eyes for a moment. Take 10 seconds to go inside, starting right now. And when you're ready, open your eyes and come back. If you went to a child, if you went to a charity, if you went to a faith-based symbol, if you went to yourself, even better. But understand we're going to need our internal why, because internal motivation is better than external. As caregivers, we're always kind of looking for the attaboy, attagirl, that type of thing. Well, an internal motivation is a river of life that runs within you, okay? It literally is your purpose and your dream. So whatever your why that you tapped, keep it, grab onto it. Understand it's going to be important as you develop emotional intelligence. Now I'm going to skip over some stuff just so we can catch up and understand that I have to use emotional intelligence now to try to give you the best I can provide you in the 45 minutes we have. There's been a history of emotional intelligence, but up until now, now, of course, for all of us, but now I'm a 67-year-old guy, is 1995. Okay, when Dr. Daniel Goleman at Harvard University wrote this fabulous book, and I really suggest you all to get it. Because again, we are all kind of geared and sometimes brainwashed into understanding that IQ is something really critical. And don't get me wrong, it may well be, but it's not going to get you as a caregiver down the road. The clinical basis of intervention in our place called emotional support at WellMed is how do we learn emotional intelligence? And Daniel Goleman said it best. If your emotional abilities aren't in hand, now listen to this as a caregiver, if you don't have self-awareness, if you're not able to manage your distressing emotions, if you can't have empathy and have effective relationships, then no matter how smart you are, you're not going to get very far. Listen to that. You could have a diamond and 10 pounds of lead, but who cares if it's in 10 pounds of lead? Emotional intelligence gets us out of the lead. Emotional intelligence, according to Dr. Goleman, and according to us, desperately as caregivers, is the idea of being self-aware, being in touch with yourself, your stress, your things that are driving you, having the self-confidence to know that you can take care of yourself, social awareness, which I think is critical coming out of COVID, which is obviously connecting to others, empathy, relationship management, right? You and your loved one taking care of it, you and your long distance caregivers, you and your family. How do we do that? How do we do a conflict management? And then self-manage, which is emotional self-regulation. At the end of this, I'm going to always end up with breath work. And that's really emblematic of self-management. But that's what emotional intelligence is, according to Dr. Goleman's book. Okay. For me as a therapist, and I'd love for you, if you do seek out a therapist, it's the basis of a concept called DBT, which in therapy is dialectical behavioral therapy, which is mindfulness, emotional regulation, distress tolerance, and interpersonal effectiveness. Now that is a lot of science, right? But just get it from a caregiver side. It's just knowing what to do when you know what to do. It's being in the moment, not judging. It's being able to take care of your stress, basically. All right. It's developing resilience because you're going to go through crisis situation and being connected to each other. So the likelihood emotional intelligence is critical to get beyond where you're at. It cannot be understated. Okay. And I can't, as much as 80% of adult success, and you can just put caregiver in the middle of adult there, comes from EQ. Dr. Goleman was spot on when he wrote that book. So emotional intelligence really is the basis at WellMed of our ESRT, emotional support program, right? We say at WellMed, like literally 90% of top performers have strong EQs, not just IQs. In fact, some don't have IQs at all. I went to initially before I went to college, I had friends of mine that were so grounded and could communicate so well. They never went to college. They became much more successful than I became using emotional intelligence. So EQ really, it's really what's responsible at WellMed for much of our job performance. And it also, believe it or not, in the work site gives us more salary, gives us more compensation. So at WellMed and with caregiving, I can tell you the 5 components of emotional intelligence is this. And as a caregiver who's taking care of a loved one and also trying to take care of yourself and your issues as best you can, right? Emotional intelligence is self-awareness. At WellMed now, we're working with all of our employees and our patients and looking at self-awareness, being in touch with yourself, the ability to recognize and understand your moods, your emotions. It's self-regulation. Hey, how do I, if I'm feeling not so great in this moment, you know, like coming on here without sound until that wonderful person reached out and did that. By the way, I was doing breath work until I heard from her. Self-regulation is ability to control, okay, your moods, right? When you know you're not feeling great. It's also the ability to suspend judgment. Another part of emotional intelligence I'd love to cover here today is the motivation. Having a passion to work for reasons that go beyond the money, the status, the fact that your loved ones are saying you're the one. What are you going to get out of caregiving? Literally, it's empathy, ability to understand the emotional makeup of other people, and self-compassion, which is something we're going to get into at another seminar if we can, is literally the ability to bear witness once you're empathic, to listen to the person in front of you, even if you can't change their situation, so that they feel you're there. And then ultimately, finally, it's social skill, right? It's proficiency in managing the relationships and building networks. Listen, every one of you probably are talking to another person in your family about your loved one, okay? And you have to really realize that you're up against ghosts and goblins, which is the family issues, the I call the brain trauma, the default to complex PTSD. How do you develop the emotional intelligence to be able to connect with your loved one that you're taking care of, and then to handle all those people who think they may know better? It's a good question, right? So at WellMed, we stress emotional intelligence because it really does decrease, stress. It improves your decision making. And we say it reduces staff turnover. Well, personally, the bottom one's the most important. It increases your personal well-being. So as a caregiver, it allows you to build what I call the emotional bank account. It really does. So that when you are in crisis as a caregiver, you can draw from it. Okay, that's what emotional intelligence does. Like a bank, you know, when you need rent and you need your mortgage and you need to pay a bill, the money's got to be there. But what if you're going through a crisis and the money's not there, meaning the resilience isn't there to help you through the crisis? That is really what emotional intelligence is about. Okay, really, the greater the obstacle, you know, literally the more the glory in overcoming it. Listen, what are the obstacles to your emotional success? They're all the things you might call a therapist or coach. So today, for this session, I'm going to be your coach. This is important because, you know, even depression, anxiety, relationship problems, all of this falls into the wheelhouse of emotional intelligence. Now, of course, you're going to say depression, it's a biochemical, genetically predisposed condition. And yes, it is. But realize even the treatment of depression in all three legs requires, you know, the medical, the medication, the psychological, which is going to see a therapist, of course, and the social. All of that actually feeds into the beauty of emotional intelligence. So why I really wanted to do this today, when there was a mix-up, I think, in terms of the topics, was I wanted to really impress upon you the concept of the science of safety. The science of safety, that's our neurological system, the autonomic nervous system. So IQ, learning a lot, reading books, getting A's, cum laude in college, whatever you thought was the thing you needed to achieve, that's all good stuff. But the science of safety doesn't rest in the mind. Remember, the longest trip we ever take in our lives is from our head to our heart. So we have tremendously smart people at WellMed, but they may not feel safe. What does that mean? Well, their nervous system might be in a fight, flight, freeze, or fawn response, right? When somebody comes at them, a loved one that they're just getting triggered with, they may attack and they may get angry, okay? Or they may run and get quiet and go to a corner. You know, the freeze response is when you kind of play possum and you do nothing, right? And you avoid provoking the threat, you just quiet, but it goes inside because the body always feels it and your inflammation goes up, your cortisol goes up. But the fourth F, the 4 Fs is fawning. We also become codependent, meaning we try to soothe the person and people please in front of them. These are all the obstacles, and the science of safety is the remedy. The science of safety, being a caregiver, comes through our autonomic nervous system. It affects so much in our lives, okay? It affects so much. It's our parasympathetic and sympathetic nervous system. So everybody asks, well, what's that all about? Well, I know you're a caregiver. I mean, if you're my age, you know, you're a boomer, 67. Our patients, literally, at WellMed are mostly over 65, right? Because we wanted to change the face of healthcare for seniors. That's what WellMed's basis was. But at the end of the day, we're all kind of big children. I know that sounds strange, but the mind in the first 10 years of our life is literally the way we see our lives often. Fight, flight, freeze. We're fawn. I came out the hero child, but Dr. Gabor Mate, who I have the privilege and pleasure to work with on the advisory board at the Polyvagal Institute, probably said it best for us caregivers and for anybody in life. And that's the greatest damage done by neglect, trauma, or emotional loss is not the immediate pain they inflict, but the long-term distortions they induce in the way a developing child will continue to interpret the world and our situation. Now, that's a lot of clinical mumbo jumbo, but he's great. That means literally is if things happen in your childhood, like they did in mine, where maybe we didn't feel safe, we kind of come out looking at the world in a cynical way or distrustful way. If we felt somewhat safe, that's great. Then we see the world in a more trusting way. But that doesn't change as we grow older. Okay, that's the default. That's the child mind. In therapy and psychology, we say we're always doomed to recreate our dramas and traumas until we intervene on them. That means if you're not embracing your emotional intelligence by embracing things in therapy, in groups, in looking at yourself and growing compassionately, in being self-aware and forgiving yourself, then chances are you're going to recreate and be stuck in the 4 Fs. So what does that mean? That's complex PTSD or childhood PTSD. We get stuck in that brain, and then as a caregiver, we get dysregulated. That means we have sometimes we come out of it like I did as a hero child, as a negative self-concept, or I came out, not feeling on 2 feet because I came from a difficult childhood. So the world looked dysregulated. I saw the world somewhat in the sense of threat, avoidance. That happens with us. It's not our fault. And listen, I tried to make it not our parents' fault too. They probably did the best they could, but they still didn't really realize the things that are important our brain was. So the difference with PTSD and complex PTSD is that PTSD is an action or something that happens, okay? A car accident, God lives in the military, it could be stepping on a landmine, war. These are things that are episodic things that hit us that shift and change our life. Well, complex PTSD are things that happen basically in childhood, interpersonal disturbances, coming out of it in a negative way, feeling that life isn't right. So the important thing as family caregivers and professional caregivers, we need to come to and arrive is, okay, the bridge is broken. How do we get across it? Maybe we were raised with adverse childhood experiences like I was. Well, do we lay in the victim role the rest of our lives? Do we lay in that martyr role? Or do we just understand, like Dr. Mate said here, that the decision to deal with ourselves is in our hands, that I'm 100% responsible for who I am in this relationship, both with myself and my loved one. And my task is to free myself sufficiently so that I can respond in the present moment, not from past programming. That for a caregiver is totally freedom. That for a human being, not a human doing, is total freedom. Okay? It's literally looking back and understanding that we can reparent ourselves and we can develop emotional intelligence. So let's revisit again Dr. Goleman's work and why it's so important for caregivers. There's 5 pillars of emotional intelligence. One of them I'm going to actually do at the end, which is kind of your self-regulator, which is breath work. But understand, and I'd love you to grab the book or the audio and take some of the things we're talking about today and begin the process. But the 5 pillars are simple. Understand your strengths and weaknesses and how often actions affect you. What do you get triggered by? Okay. Self-awareness is also better able to handle and learn from constructive criticism. So it's not to take things personally. I always recommend the book, The 4 Agreements. It's a wonderful book in terms of that for caregivers, but that's all self-awareness. It means in the moment, okay, I got to understand my strengths. In the moment, if I get stressed out, what do I do? Well, that's self-regulation, okay? Self-regulation expresses emotions and with restraint and control, but that's done through breath work, through yoga, through walking, through kind of taking yourself out of the fight, flight, freeze response. And soothing your own self, your own autonomic nervous system. Okay, we have to be responsible, as Dr. Mate said. We have to be 100% responsible for, if nothing else, stress reduction. If you can learn that in today as a caregiver, I think this is all you need really to begin this process. So the 3rd pillar is motivation. Okay, we're not going to be motivated at all unless we're self-motivated. It's just like having compassion. If we don't have compassion for ourselves, how can we give it to others? So the 3rd pillar is resiliency and being optimistic and that inner sort of thing, that what is your why, driven by inner ambition. The 4th pillar of Dr. Goleman's work and for family caregivers is critical, is having empathy. Basically, it's the understanding of human nature. It's being kind to yourself, because being strong because you know you're fearful, to understand the duality of our lives, both sides of the coin. Okay, it's connecting with another on an emotional level because you do understand yourself, right? To know yourself is to know the world. It's so important to understand. Empathy is there when you can be empathic for yourself. So that is the 4th pillar I want you to hold on to. Finally, emotional intelligence results, I think, in the byproduct is people skills. Okay, which is the ability, if you know yourself well, to build rapport and to trust quicker, not to default to that lizard or trauma mind, right? It's to avoid these power struggles and backstabbing that don't jump into your loved one or your family members' drama or trauma. Don't bite the bait. You know, I bring up this, it's a current topic and everybody seems to understand it better when I do this in my talks, is to bring up things you may know. But going back to Will Smith, okay, I know when nobody wants to, you're probably overwhelmed and tired of it, but the Oscars. So this man actually, who I've watched all my life and, he's younger than me, but I was a Fresh Prince of Bel-Air kind of guy. He's a multi-millionaire, done extraordinarily well, successful beyond measure. And he had many films in him to go. And he's a very grounded guy. He got into a tough relationship, right, with his wife. This is all history and you can read about on Facebook. But on that night, when they said something, and he took offense, not from the joke, because he laughed, if you remember, but from the look that he got. And he went up and hit Chris Rock. Look, it's critical for him not to jump into the drama. I'm going to show you at the end what he should have done through breath work, which would have made his reaction a proaction, that he would not have gone up there and hit him and ruined his life, ruined his career. He would have sat back and instead been proactive. That's all we're asking for as you accomplish these pillars of the emotional intelligence. Eventually, you're going to enjoy other people and have respect for other people. And the last thing you're going to do is get up and hit somebody. This is all about the brain, okay? We've learned in healthcare, but through the world of psychology, that today, since the 1980s, the brain is literally the holder of habit. That means that that child that was kind of stuck in that trauma brain or that complex PTSD that had the fight, flight, fear reaction, to become unstuck, you could build a bridge in the brain. The beauty is, as a caregiver, you don't have to default to that brain. The beauty is you don't have to come and see a therapist every week and depend upon them to give you answers, even though I totally believe in therapy and I think you should have a safe place. It is that you can build bridges in your brain. So as a caregiver, let's do it. Let's take Nike and say, first, let's get the book Emotional Intelligence, Daniel Goleman, read about it. But really, if you don't want the book, this is a question of strictly becoming self-aware, okay? Self-awareness on our caregiver journey is critical. Can you really ask for feedback? And can you really hear it when somebody tells you stuff that you don't want to hear? I always tell people the best friend they have in life is somebody who'll say negative things to their face and not behind their back. Can you recognize your strengths and weaknesses? Maybe after we get done today, go sit down and just honor them. That I know I can't develop the emotional support response team around WellMed if I don't have a partner. My partner is Tammy, and Tammy is incredible. But I do also know that my strength is the clinical. I think I know the programs to develop, as she knows how to get it out there. But I have to know that that's not in my wheelhouse, that I know my weakness and I know my strength. It's the only way I think our teams ever can be high performing. So in terms of your self-awareness as a caregiver, do you self-reflect? You take time to unlock thoughts and emotions that might otherwise be dysregulated. Maybe look at yourself instead of just blaming and shaming or pointing fingers. What is my role in this particular thing here? What could I do? Can I monitor, by the way, my self-talk? As caregivers, we jump into that brain, that trauma brain of ours, and we start becoming the executioner, and we constantly talk, and we constantly go down a negative place and keep negative talk, and we become this kind of victim and judge in our minds. And I think that we are our own worst enemy. So can you do that? Can you monitor your self-talk? That's a dysregulating thing when you do what I just said. How about saying no? Do you feel guilty? Because boundaries are going to be critical. And finally, to be self-aware, can you question your decisions? That's pillar one. I don't know if there's a more important. Pillar two, we're going to do the breath work at the end. That's a real metaphor. But pillar two is self-regulation. Can you emotionally regulate when you're stressed out? Can you be in touch? Take the step one and really then shift it to a more optimistic view, okay? Can you not be hurt by other people, by processing feelings? So critical. That's a high intelligence, emotionally intelligent person. When you react to other people and jump into the mud and carry a grudge, that says we got work to do. Third pillar, how do you stay motivated? Well, in that self-awareness, you check your attitude, you stay positive, okay? You don't, catastrophize. You don't become that person that life is going to end tomorrow. You can see yourself through. You can have your why. You can go slowly. You can build awesome relationships at work and with your loved ones. Okay, it's so critical. At WellMed, motivation is so important. We have people try to understand their why and live a balanced life. The pillar four as a caregiver is really critical. Okay, how do you see the world? That's important. Do you appreciate your loved one and people as human beings instead of human doings? Meaning, can you assume positive intent without judging? Everybody's trying their best. Now, there are people that are clinically challenged and have certain diagnoses, and I can guarantee you all of the suspend judgment won't help. Sometimes you have to call good and evil out. But first thought is, can you appreciate people as human beings? Empathy is also about understanding your feelings and others and being able to communicate that understanding. So maybe it's owning something and going to somebody and say, now what can you do? I've often said burnout, especially among caregivers, is a two-way street. If you're working harder than the person in front of you, that's the recipe for burnout, right? If you kind of meet halfway, that's the way you can communicate, connect together and avoid burnout. So the elements of empathy are critical for us as caregivers. So finally, really, this empathy, if you understand it, especially at WellMed, not 90% of all of our employees, regardless of age, believe that empathy is an important value. But how do we do it? Well, the only way we can do it is to be self-aware. Okay, it's the only way we can do it is to understand that we have to understand our own path, our own really journey down the road less traveled. To do that, we will have empathy. Like my mom says, to know oneself is to know the world. So the final pillar, which I think all this yields, is a greater understanding of people around us and how to develop a relationship, not just with our caree, but with other people in our family. Maybe it's with the doctor's office, maybe it's with others. A healthy relationship where two independent people just make a deal that they'll help make the other person the best version of themselves. If your loved one has Alzheimer's, has a third stage, neurological condition, has psychiatric outbursts, you still have to then remeasure what the bar is here. But they too can still have their own decision-making capabilities sometimes, even in a cognitive fog, and they too need their self-esteem. So we have to make each other the best versions of ourselves, right? That's what it's all about. That's the beauty of emotional intelligence, is that if you can do the first four, the people skills will follow. So you can be the most intelligent person in the world, but if you don't have the people skills to connect, it's going to be really a tough road to hoe. You're going to be a smart person like that diamond and 10 pounds of lead. So emotional intelligence is not possible without having healthy relationships around you. It's very important, and you've often heard me say, if you tuned into this series, not to hang around toxic people. Okay, toxic people are energy vampires. They will take your energy. Those are people who control you, push you around, kind of dominate you, bully you, that is really important not to be there. It's hard to become emotionally intelligent when you're in that kind of a situation. So if you have a healthy relationship with somebody, it means you can be honest with them. You can openly discuss it. Listen, you got to be openly honest. It's not your problem if the other person takes it differently. It really isn't. You can't take it personal. Let them take it to their therapist if they have a problem. But you have to show up and be authentic. That's the beauty of it. All the child ever wanted in life was authenticity and a healthy attachment. So the second thing is really that is for a healthy relationship is to be respectful. Okay. When you're not respectful, okay, it's a real challenge, right? That means boundaries are critical to develop. Dr. Brene Brown, as you're going to come to see, is great with that. She's on YouTube. Okay. You can write that down. BRENE, BROWN. We have to be able to compromise. If you see life in the black and white area, and that's all you see it, you don't have emotional intelligence. End of story. You have to grow the fact that life is found in the gray, being able to compromise, willing to give up something, to get something, to meet in the middle, to asking instead of just expediting, okay? Making big decisions together. It's important to involve our loved one, important to involve anybody, our loved ones, and don't let them off the hook, hold people accountable. Okay, a healthy relationship is feeling autonomically safe, right? Don't belittle, don't judge. Our neural systems have to be there. That's what breath work is about. That's emotional regulation. It's also supporting each other. Okay, even if you don't understand, that means listening intently to the other person's pain, okay, and understanding it, realizing that pain is inevitable, but suffering is not. And finally, trust. And the acronym for trust is to reach ultimate success together. So that's a whole lot of drinking from a fire hose. A lot of this, again, can be explained more in detail If you tune into our series, we're going to do things over time that will help you develop emotional intelligence, but also is to forgive yourself and respect yourself. Okay. Really, to know oneself is to know the world. And if you can first take the piece of self-regulation, which I think is critical, be just responsible for your stress, be kind of there, you're going to find out you're going to send off vibes and create a program of attraction instead of a program of promotion. People don't like people promoting that which they don't live. So as a caregiver, if you can develop emotional intelligence and pay attention to these 5 pillars, people are going to come towards you. They're not going to run away from you. You won't be that black and white thinker. You'll be that person that's safe and can honor each other. So here's where I mentioned that I love for you to keep pursuing the work of Dr. Brown. She's very understandable. Brene is very sharp. But as a caregiver, again, emotional intelligence requires us to set boundaries. It doesn't make you mean, can't feel guilty. Boundaries help people. They help the person in front of you know who you are. They're a value judgment. If you have certain values, you have to put boundaries around it. Okay. It's not being the people pleaser and jumping in. It's critical to honor your feelings, but to put boundaries for the loved ones. It's also important to respect somebody else's boundaries. If they say no, no means no. It's not a negative thing against you. It's not a negative thing against them. It's called a boundary. Okay. That's all. So when we fail to set boundaries, as Brene says, and hold people accountable, as caregivers, we definitely feel used and mistreated. So I think it's important. So what I'm asking you as a caregiver to find emotional intelligence is to reparent your energy. I think it's something important. When I look back at my life and my therapy, and I was a caregiver too, God rest my mother's soul too. And that's how I kind of developed the Lisa Gibbons Memory Foundation and the book, Take Your Oxygen First. I want you to understand that we need to caregive our own selves first. That's what Take Your Oxygen First was about. What does that mean? That means reparent ourselves. The things we didn't get as a caregiver, as a child, and we now are getting triggered, okay? Being fair, consistent, and available maybe, which is a tough thing to do. I have, as a parent, have a tough time being that all the time. It's important because it creates, you know, when you reparent yourself, it allows you to develop the emotional intelligence of self-awareness to understand around you. It also allows us to regulate ourselves. Now, if you can't do that, you can end up into the negative world of fear, meltdowns, right? That you've got to reparent yourself in a way that you would want, the way you would raise anybody, the way you take care of your loved one, fair, consistent, and available. So as a caregiver, emotional intelligence is resilience. So critical. If you have to boil it down to anything, it's falling down 7 times and getting up 8. Okay, emotional intelligence and resilience goes hand in hand with family caregiving. And that's why I wanted to do this. When things happen, like they happen to get on here, I want you to understand that I have to be resilient. Okay, I can't just fold up the computer in this hotel room in New Orleans and leave, you know, all the fabulous people that had the real kind of self-awareness to check in here today. I couldn't. We have a 50-50 bargain that I would show up, that you would be there. That's what it's all about. So resilience is emotional intelligence. It is self-awareness, emotional expression, being authentic, which is a child all we wanted, and empathy, and having the ability to regulate your own health care. Caregivers understand resilience by maybe understanding self-esteem best. Whenever time somebody comes up to me and says, "Doctor, I feel guilty. What do I do about it?" I say, raise your self-esteem. The higher your self-esteem, the lower your guilt. Okay, the higher your guilt, usually lower your self-esteem. So emotional intelligence is understanding I don't have to feel guilty for that person. It's a gift that I need to just take care of myself, have boundaries, and honor them. I have to learn from my mistakes. I have to be accountable. That's emotional intelligence. Okay, it's understanding and acceptance of my strength and my weaknesses. There's things I can't do. I need to delegate. It's literally, okay, all the things that we think it is, but it begins with a single step. And I think it begins also, first of all, an emotional self-regulation, getting in touch with your stress, and being around healthy people, a healthy community, a healthy partner, okay? People that don't abuse you. To me, toxic relationships are about those with no boundaries and those that are actually in a very dominating bullying sort of relationship. So here's the thing. Emotional intelligence is something we desperately need as caregivers, but it's tough. No, it's not so tough. It's tough to look inside and look at ourselves. That's always tough. But I say to you, as you do that, realize that this progress in life is 3 steps forward and 2 backwards. Okay. A journey of 1,000 miles literally begins with a single step, according to Lao Tzu. And as a caregiver, I want you to understand that you can become the smartest person in the world. But today, I'd like for you to leave this session thinking more and more about how do I foster my emotional intelligence. I know it may be new. It really is. Our neurosystems are here all our lives since the day we were born. But now we're just coming in contact with the fact of how important they are. So sometimes we're going to make it, sometimes not. Sometimes you'll be in cues and triggers. Sometimes you won't. Learn from it. The journey begins now. But also understand that the longest journey you make is from your head to your heart. So the key to emotional intelligence is experiential interventions. It's the breath work I'm about to do with you, it's yoga, it's going out and walking, it's being in a healthy bridge game, it's being with your church, your synagogue, your ashram, with people that you feel healthy around you. These are all things that are experiential that take you to your heart. It's not found inside of a book. Yes, I want you to read Dr. Goleman's book, but not that that's going to be a silver bullet. Just understand the path. Because look, when you're a caregiver, understand this, that you never see things as they are. You don't, and neither does your loved one. We see them as we are. So if we're depressed or anxious or overwhelmed, that's how we're going to perceive the situation. What emotional intelligence allows us to do is level set, get in touch with our emotional regulation, be accountable, understand the person in front of us, develop that, and really develop the concept that we have. And I've worked with addicts and alcoholics forever to really grant serenity to ourselves, to accept the things that you can't change. You can't change COVID. Tragically, you probably can't change your loved one's disease state. Okay, you can't change hurricanes coming at you. So you have to understand that you can change your response. So grant me the serenity, accept the things I can't change, the courage to change the things I can. That's emotional intelligence. And again, having the wisdom to know the difference. So you can deal with your response. That's not found in a book. That's found experientially in our lives. So all I'm asking you for a caregiver is to do your CPTSD homework. Not tough. You don't have to go read a book and answer 20 questions here. You got to be in touch with stress. Your stress reduction. If you're in an argument with somebody, say, look, I'm going to show you how to do some breath work. Look, I'm going to take 80 seconds here and do some breath work. Why don't you do the same thing? I'll come back in 80 seconds and start this conversation again. So what do you think about that? Easy enough? I know it sounds easier said than done, right? But that's all. Have you ever gotten calm when somebody's told you to be calm? No, of course not. It's like Nancy Reagan when she said, just say no to addicts and alcoholics. They can't just say no. This comes from within. We have to understand our stress reduction is important and critical for emotional intelligence. So I'm going to end, obviously, today, always like I do every time, is to give you a tool, because I want you to become self-aware and reduce anxiety and stress. I think the greatest way as human beings is to develop your breath work. Yes, you can meditate. Yes, you could go out and do yoga, and I love it, and Pilates and walk. These are all ways to retrain your brain. These are all ways to be striving in the moment, in the present, where the proaction is. Okay. When Will Smith jumped up, believe me, he was in the past or the future, but he was not in the present. That would have been important. So you can use your breath. Policemen, firemen, emergency medical technicians, they all do before they go into tough places. Guess what, family caregiver? You're like a first responder. You're running into somebody's burning home when others are running out. You really are. So understand, to me, you guys have the same mindset as all cops and firemen do. Okay. It's critical for you to understand that, because our breath can change our mind and body. Our breath can take us in any sort of trauma reduction technique from despair to encouragement. This is emotional intelligence. When you're feeling not sorts, you're feeling disengaged, get engaged. I know it's not a panacea. You can do breath work over time. It will retrain the brain. That's what all trauma reduction does. That's what emotional intelligence is. You have the opportunity to become your own therapist. You can ground yourself on 2 feet using a trauma reduction technique. You can transform your body, get in control. So look, we're going to do breath work here, but I can tell you to really self-regulate, to take care of yourself, you can choose your transformative path. Okay. It could be Jesus, Moses, Allah, whatever you want on the religious side. But it has to be being self-compassionate. It has to be embracing yourself, reparenting yourself, learning the 5 pillars of emotional intelligence, really. And that's our task as a caregiver. It's not going to come from book learning. I wrote with Lisa, take your oxygen first. But that's great for you to be aware of all those things and the how-to, but we have to feel it, okay? We have to do experiential learning for ourselves, trust the process, okay? This is where emotional intelligence comes in, to trust the process. So let's do some breath work here. Let's unlock the power of our vagus nerve, okay? Listen, mankind did not evolve because of the survival of the fittest. That's a misnomer. We evolved because we could co-regulate with communities, and we can develop innovation, but we could also self-regulate. We could be our own therapist. Okay, other species could not. Now understand, you can do it as a caregiver. When you're in a dysregulated system, you could calm yourself, and literally there's physiological evidence that shows it works. Okay, you can retrain your brain. You can start learning emotional intelligence, which is so much more important than IQ. Now, we're going to take 80 seconds to do some breath work. If you want, I'm not going to commandeer your breath. I'm a hypnotherapist. I honor you. If you want to do prayer, you want to do meditation, you want to just stay silent, you want to go to a safe place you once were, touch it, feel it, smell it. Those are all grounding techniques. They're emotionally intelligent driven techniques to get you to your body. Okay. It will calm you. Like that picture says, it'll put you like on the sand. All these are grounding techniques that make you more proactive rather than reactive. But Dr. Andy Weil, who I had the great pleasure working with 25 years ago, and he's on YouTube. So after this, I'd love you to go to YouTube. Remember 478. He took this around to family caregivers, to professional caregivers, to everybody who would allow him to measure it. Found out that you could get calm in the moment. And when we're feeling dysregulated, our loved one is there, our doctor is making us dysregulated, ourselves, our anxiety, COVID, and you could become regulated in that moment again by using 478. That is the cadence. So here's how you do it. If you haven't tuned in before, many of you may have, and you can do it, and you may be black belts. But for the newcomers, when I ask you to close your eyes, I'm going to ask you to breathe in through your nostrils for 4 seconds, like this. It's cool, it's refreshing, you can feel it. I'm going to ask you to keep it in your mind for up to 7 seconds. You can picture peace or serenity or any guided image. But when you exhale, this is a physiological thing, exhale loudly, exhale with gusto, exhale like this for 8 seconds. That triggers the vagus nerve response. So when you get into an argument or a conflict with somebody, I always tell our medical assistants, tell the person you're going to take 80 seconds to go breathe. They should do the same thing, and then you could resume the conversation. Your loved one can do it. My child has been doing it during COVID. It's a great way to calm your system and to develop real emotional intelligence. It really is. So why don't you join me? I will let maybe a minute or two for Q&A. Only takes 80 seconds. I'm just going to ask you rhetorically, are you worth your self-care 80 seconds? Oh, caregiver, you got to be. So with your eyes closed, put your feet on the ground. If you have shoes on, feel the floor through your shoes. And if you're barefoot, feel the floor through your feet. But with your back upright with respect, if you're listening here and watching on the Zoom session or somewhere else, I would love for you to do 478 with me and take this home with you. Okay, eyes closed. Let's breathe in through our nostrils for 4 seconds. Let's keep it. Let's swish it around for up to 7 seconds in our mind. Now, let's blow out with passion for 8. Breathe in the calmness again for 4 seconds. Let's keep it. Swish it around for up to 7 seconds. Now, blow out with gusto for 8. Breathe in the calmness for 4. Keep it for 7. Now, blow out again the anxiety for 8. Last time. Breathe in the calmness for 4 seconds. Keep it. Swish it around for up to 7. Blow out all the anxiety you feel. Become more emotionally intelligent with 8. With your eyes still closed, please, feet on the ground, go inside your body and scan it. Okay, this experiential exercise is about becoming regulated. It's about exercising the principles of emotional intelligence and self-regulating when you're feeling dysregulated. You've literally shifted the chemistry of your body. You produced oxytocin, which is a hormone that connects your neurotransmitters. You are able, because you're emotionally intelligent right now, to be able to calm your stress function. Okay, yeah. Now, when you're ready, open your eyes and come back to our meeting here and understand this is an act of self-compassion. It's also the first steps to really getting into this concept of EQ. A moment of self-compassion can change your entire day, and a string of these moments literally can change the course of your life. So you can always get us at this well-met address. I'm more than happy to get it to you eventually, get you maybe a recorded copy. You don't even need that. Dr. Weil is wonderful. He's got a 2-minute video on YouTube, as I mentioned. Go there, start practicing this. This is a wonderful foundation to develop emotional intelligence and understand that you literally are dealing with the triumph of heart overhead. Okay, it's critical that emotional intelligence takes you to an in-body experience instead of a cerebral experience. So family caregivers, big hug to you. Be the change you want to see in your people around you and your loved one and anybody that connects with you in this caregiving experience. Be able to take your oxygen first, become emotionally intelligent, and know that better things are coming. They really are. So keep calm, and just breathe. Glenda, it's all yours. Glenda, are you there? Hi, love.
Okay.
Or
Can you hear me, Jamie?
You were zoning, right? You felt good.
Yeah. So Chris had asked earlier, what is duality?
Great. Duality is critical for us to understand. We get to this hero world, this silver bullet that we're everything to everybody as family caregivers, right? Listen, the only way you're courageous is if you're in touch with your fearfulness. Duality is 2 sides of a coin. It's being a human being, not a human doing. It's the basis of emotional intelligence. It's knowing what's attractive because you know what's not attractive. It's being, like I said, calm because you know excitement. It's being humble to know what you can do and what you cannot do. Okay, duality is literally embracing you as a human condition, taking care of yourself as a maternal or paternal figure. And like I said, learning emotional intelligence. Duality is the human condition. No other species can do it. You are not one trait. You are not Superman or Superwoman. Kryptonite is there. So be sure to understand our weaknesses and our strengths and bring in people to help us on all sides. So thank you for that question.
And Danessa had a comment that you might want to comment on. She said the ability to avoid power struggles comes down to one's own ability to practice self-regulation first and self-awareness second.
Well, listen, I think that's spot on, really. Self-awareness comes from self-regulation. She's right. I will comment, touche. Listen, nobody wants to live in stress. You got oxytocin, that you want to create, right? But if you're living in stress, you've got inflammation, right? You've got, your hormones are off. You're feeling like hell. The body keeps the score. So I think that comment's spot on. When you're feeling dysregulated stress and you do emotional self-regulation, guess what? The byproduct is self-awareness. So I concur. I would say that's exactly that order. But guess what? That makes us accountable to self-regulate so we can find self-awareness. Great statement.
Right. Danessa, I see you unmuted your phone. Did you have additional comments?
I just want to agree with exactly what was just said. I mean, you can have empathy, compassion, you can have all of the other things, but if you can't self-regulate and you can't be self-aware, it kind of, invalidates those gifts. So thank you.
Thank you so much. You were spot on. Maybe next time you'll do the session. I think I love it. I can learn. I think that when you put it in that order, Vanessa, I think you do everybody a favor here. Do we really want to be stressed out? No, let's self-regulate, and then you'll develop the self-awareness that it works.
One last one. Adriana, I wanted to know if we could provide the book title and author that was in the chat. Well, I'm not sure exactly, Adriana, now that I look at it, which one you were talking about. I don't know if it was Dr. Gabor Mata's information.
Gabor Mate is phenomenal. I'd love everybody to go to YouTube afterwards. He's an internal medicine doc. And I'll tell you that not only is Gabor amazing, but the one that you're asking me about now, I think what you're saying, that's Gabor. I just put it in there. Can you, oh, that's a direct message. I'm so sorry. You can do it, Glenda. You're much better than I am. You see, I know my weaknesses. Gabor Mate is fabulous, but also I'd love for you to go look at Daniel Goleman, Goleman. He wrote this in the 90s, but he's still relevant today. And it's heady stuff, so just read all you can, but put it down. I don't want you to become Harvard experts on emotional intelligence. I want you to understand the critical nature of emotional intelligence. So I want to, Goleman is G-O-L-E, actually. Goleman, Goleman. So when you go look, that's great. That's a great book. And then I mentioned the 4 agreements, which you all know is a transformative path. All therapy is, and all caregiving transformation is 3 things: awareness, transformation, and self-love. So if you're looking at a good way to start transforming, go get the 4 agreements by Dr. Miguel Ruiz. It'll open up doors to you, and take it from there. So that's enough drinking from a fire hose, though. At the end of the day, I don't want you to get stuck in the book pages. I want you to get stuck in what Vanessa said. Really, the self-regulation of stress. You'll learn so much more from that.
Let's see. Catherine says she understands your advice about staying away from energy vampires, but can you speak to the fact that sometimes you can't avoid one? Taking a breath could very well be taken the wrong way.
You know, they can take it the wrong way, and that's they have to. But here's the thing: I work with personality disorders. My second book is on them. You know, the best way to deal with them is no contact. And if you have a child or you have a loved one with one, obviously it's modified contact. But I will tell you that the energy vampire, the antidote to any energy vampire, it could be work, it could be a person, it could be something else sucking the energy out of us. It's our values. Values. Listen, values are, as I say, the crucifix and the garlic to the energy vampire. Who we are, the boundaries we set. Will we take this diminishing abusive behavior from somebody? Do we think more of ourselves than to do that? If you're taking it from somebody, go ahead, get a therapist, develop the strategy and game plan. You do not have to take it from what we call a cluster B, a personality distorted person. You can have boundaries. You can either get away, you can either get modified contact, or you can bring in others. But whatever you do, do not bite the bait. Do not fight with them. Because at the end of the day, they're much more skilled in fighting because they lack empathy and accountability. And you may lose every battle. But if you really want to win the war, go take care of yourself with emotional intelligence and move on.
Thank you so much. Let me see, anything else? People are talking about taking notes. Yes, this will be posted. This session will be posted on the Caregiver Teleconnection website in its entirety. So you can go back, and when you're watching that, you can even stop it and write notes if you missed some things today. That's what I advise you to do, and I'm putting that in the chat box. I think Dr. Jamie talked about Dr. Mate's ERST series that's on YouTube. Is that correct, Jamie?
Well, ERST is actually us, emotional support. It's ESRT, emotional support response team.
ESRT, excuse me.
Yeah, Dr. Gabor Mate talks about all of us, the child, the mind, the authenticity that the child wanted, and the healthy attachment to a primary caregiver. He's also working on his own stuff. He's a great man. He's came from Hungary, and you can find so many books. And he's on YouTube. Again, 10 minutes with Gabor. I'm fortunate Dr. Rapier and I both sit on the advisory board with him. You'll learn so much. And he's got such a wonderful disposition. So take a look at Dr. Mate's work.
All right. Thank you so much, Dr. Jamie. We've gone over because we got a little bit of a late start. So as I said early on, thank you for being with us today. Thank you for your patience. Thank you for helping us through our technical difficulties, and we certainly hope to hear you and see you on future sessions. And Dr. Jamie, be careful going home.
I will. I fly back tonight. Be kind to yourselves, you all. Big hug to you. And look, emotional intelligence is a wonderful thing. Even if it's not a loved one, that's the byproduct of it. It's the greatest way to start a path of healing for ourselves. So be kind to yourselves, love yourself, reparent yourself, and you'll find out the world starts getting better all around you. Thank you.
Thank you, Jamie, and thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.